want to talk about being dead today. Dead, but more alive than ever before. Now, this gentleman is Leif Mutaka. Leif Mutaka is the education director for the Adventist Church in the country of Kenya. When I first met Leif, we've had some wonderful, this is one of my heroes in education in the world. When Leif finished university with his PhD, he became the associate education director for the country of Zambia. He did that for 22 years, retired, and became the education director for the Adventist Church. He said, I cannot give the rest of my life to the government. I've got to give it to my own church. And if you spend any time looking at how many students we have, 2 summers, or last summer, I had the privilege of doing graduation at Rusango Adventist University, which is right square in the middle of Zambia. They have 6,000 students. It's one of the larger Adventist universities in the world. And they, from business masters and doctorates to nursing, I mean, it's all there, and it's an amazing place. And he's the education superintendent. So I asked him a question that I ask a lot of people. Tell me about your baptism. If somebody from Zambia can blush, he blushed. He just went red. And he said, it was the worst day of my life. And I said, your baptism was the worst day of your life? And he said, yeah, there was this man, he had come to our little Adventist school out in the middle of nowhere on the edge of the Zambezi River, and he preached all week long, and he told us we had to die so that we could be God's children. And I was 12 years old, and I believed him. And so finally on Friday, he came to me and he said, Leif, do you want to die for Jesus? And I said, well, yeah, I think I do. And he said, okay, we'll be baptizing you tomorrow. And I'm going to make you first in line. Well, Leif went back to his little dorm room and wrote a letter to his mom and dad. I love you much. And I know you had big plans for me. But the pastor says that if I really want to follow Jesus, I have to die, and they're going to baptize me tomorrow, and I will die. I'm sorry. God be with you. I love you. He did the same thing. In fact, he gave a list of things that he gave away to his roommates and other people. You know, as soon as I'm gone, you can have this stuff. And then Sabbath afternoon came, the baptism. Out into the river, the Zambezi, with crocodiles down there and elephants over there and hippos down that way. And pastor took him out in the water, put his hand up, put his hand over his mouth and said, Leif Mutaka has chosen to die for Jesus Christ, and put him in the water. When he came up, he couldn't believe he was still alive. He said, I was so sure I was going to die. I was terrified. Why does God require this kind of sacrifice? I was excited about living, but I decided it was all okay. This is what he had been taught. Colossians chapter 2. You're already in. You're an insider. Going under the water was a burial of your old life. Coming up out of it was a resurrection. God raising you from the dead as he did Christ. Think of it. All sins forgiven, the slate wiped clean, that old arrest warrant canceled and nailed to Christ's cross. And his life was telling me this, big tears flowing down his face. And he says, Dirksen, you're not going to believe this, but my worst day became my happiest day. For I discovered that when you die, it's not the end. It is the beginning of real life. Colossians goes on. Good old Paul. So, Colossians chapter 3. If you're serious about living this new resurrection life with Christ, act like it. That is where the Adventist Church has stopped for years. We don't bother to read any of the rest of it. We stop right there. And we have become a church of do's and behavior. Forgive me. Sabbath afternoon over in Palmy, I was at a gathering of about, 40 young adults and others. And we were talking about the church and why it was hard for some of these people to go to church. And they all said exactly the same thing. I believe in a God of grace. The church I go to seems to believe in a God of behavior. I mean, I was told last Sabbath that if I did not know the page number for the hymn that we were going to sing, that I was not a true Adventist. And then I was told that if I used a version other than King James, I was not a true Adventist. I can't go back to that church because I feel I am being analyzed by behavior instead of loved in Christ's grace. If coming up out of the water is going to be the best day in your life, it has got to be a day when Christ's love fills you. And remember, this text in King James says, "For Jesus Christ will come into you, and it will be Christ in you, the hope of glory." Forgive me, but you know what that means? When you get baptized, Jesus gets inside you and transforms you from the inside out. Adventist education, Adventist pastors, Adventist communities have spent far too much time trying to transform from the outside in. It doesn't work. It does not work. 5 years as a high school principal in the United States taught me that really clearly. I can't change kids by their behavior. I can't get to their heart by fixing what kind of clothes they wore to class. But there is a way. Pursue the things over which Christ presides. Don't shuffle along, your eyes to the ground, absorbed in the things right in front of you. Look up. Be alert to what's going on around Christ. That's where the action is. See things from his perspective. King James and New International say this: take your mind, place it on things where Christ is at the right hand of God. Take your heart, fix it on the things of eternity, not the things of earth. I'd like to suggest that if there's anything I want you to take home from my brief worships here this week, it's those two concepts. Pursue the things over which Christ presides. In your work, every day, stop and say, okay, intellectually, how can Christ and I work on this problem together? Emotionally, heart. This is place your mind, fix it on Christ. Take your heart, fix it on Christ. Emotionally, how can I deal with what little Freddie's doing right now and not smack him or punish him, but somehow disciple him instead? Your old life is dead. Your new life is with Christ and God. He is your life. Now, I can't stop there. The guy on the left from PNG, the guy on the bottom right from Zambia, the guy on the top right from Korenbong. But you all know Graham. If anybody that I have worked with in my life has taught me about grace, it's been Graham Frauenfelder. You know, he and I, we got arrested one time in Hungary for doing puppet ministry in the subway. Way to go, Dick. We've just had wonderful times all over the world. I've stood and listened, I've watched as he has trained hundreds and hundreds of young people to be evangelists at Olympics, Barcelona, Beijing. That's where he is, helping people learn what it is to have joy in Jesus Christ. And that's what happens when you say, it's Christ in me, the hope of glory. It transforms you. Top right, the oldest Seventh-day Adventist on Lake Titicaca in Peru. I went to her one Sabbath afternoon and I said, may I take your picture? And she said, no, I'm ugly. All this in Spanish. And she said, no, estoy muy feo, no vale la pena. And I said, no, I want to do it. She said, no. So I came back and I tried once more and she said, Señor, que no tienes oídos. Can't you hear me? So I gave up. And then I looked and I said, I'm going to try one more time. And so I went over and I said, ma'am, I want to tell you something about how you look. I said, "You look like a Navajo princess. I love your hair." She said, "Where do you want me to stand?" She's at the door of a Seventh-day Adventist school where she teaches to the Uros Indians on Lake Titicaca, where this old lady comes in and she doesn't teach math or PE or anything like that. She teaches compassion to the children. That's all she teaches. How can you live a life of compassion? Maybe it takes a Navajo princess to pull it off. Bottom right, if I'd had a pitchfork that day, I would have had him hold it. Doesn't that look like the American Gothic picture? I mean, it's just wonderful. These are two old Seventh-day Adventist people from a little tiny dusty town in Mozambique. And I asked them, "What's important?" "The only thing that's important, Pastor Dick, is being happy with Jesus in my heart." The girl on the left, Chile, elementary school. I can go to public schools and never get that picture. Never. I can go to public schools all around the world and never get the Navajo princess. There is something different about the quality of image I'm able to get from a Seventh-day Adventist in a Seventh-day Adventist educational place. That difference is Jesus in the heart. It glows out. Now, there is a theology that Ellen White is one who speaks very clearly about. When you are close to Jesus and Jesus is living in you, people see you and they want to talk about Jesus because they just saw him in your eyes. Moving on. So, I love this section of the book of Colossians. The first two verses say, take your mind, put it on Jesus, not on the garbage of this earth. Take your heart, put it where Christ is, not where Trump walks. And then, beginning in verse 3, it says, and take off. And the words are listed in such a way that you know this is God saying, I will in you do a miracle work. We will take off. And the first thing, there's a whole paragraph on sexual immorality. I'm not going to go there tonight. That's a conversation for another time. But I was blown away at a men's retreat I attended recently where the speaker said, all right, I want to talk about pornography. Don't do it. And then he moved on. And I said, there's a guy who's never gone to a curriculum and instruction class. The next thing is lust. And then there's this list. Anger, rage, and malice. Those have got to go away. Do you notice that they build on each other? And these are in all the versions. It's there and the words are very clear. There's nothing else there's no other words you can really put in there to replace these. Anger, rage, malice. Anger, I'm ticked about something, and it may be simply because Air New Zealand or Qantas lost my luggage. I'm mad. Well, if I stay mad long enough and I really start dwelling on it, I get to where I can get really ragey about it. Stupid people, I just can't believe. And then it becomes malice, and I go online and I start putting posts on TripAdvisor saying, these guys are idiots, they lost my bags. You see the process? How many times are you and I in that process? And God says, hang on a minute. You know what's really important in the Christian life? It's that you don't have those. Anger, rage, and malice go away. That you never have to deal with them because you have chosen, and here's where I'm going, compassion. If you go to the next verse, Paul is very clear. And put on the things that are like Christ. Compassion is number one. I'm fascinated by that. Why didn't he say Sabbath? If you're going to be a Christian and Jesus is living in you, what are the what's the first thing that happens to you? Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Inside out, remember. This is not an outside-in thing. You don't quit wearing jewelry. You don't put away your wedding ring. You don't start wearing ties. You don't do any of that stuff. You exhibit, through the power of the indwelling Christ, compassion. This was written for teachers and teacher leaders, by the way. I really believe that. If you don't understand what I'm saying, go to the book of Ephesians and look up the school of Hippocrates. Is that right? I'm saying something wrong, but Paul took a school over. And in a period of 2 years, he made sure that everybody in Asia knew the name of Jesus Christ. And what he taught was the character of Christ. The school of Eusebius. Put on compassion. Now, I need to tell you about this picture. I'm in Malawi. No, where am I? I'm in Mozambique. And I'm in a little Adventist church that's nothing but sticks. And this little boy fell down. He was having trouble with his little toy, and everything was just going wrong in his life. And I watched this man. I do not know if it was his dad or somebody else. But I watched this man come over. And you'll notice there is no tension in that hand. He's not grabbing and shutting the kid up. That's anger, rage, malice process. He's there in compassion. Everything you see that hand do right now is the compassion of Jesus Christ. He went over, he put his hand, I took that picture, and I took a whole other series of pictures as he lifted the kid up, put him in his arms, took him over, helped fix the toy, and absolutely loved him. Do you know what compassion means? Loving with someone else. That's all it's about. It's taking the best you've got and giving it away to somebody else who needs it. It's just that simple. Spirituality is not hard. Growing as a Christian is not hard. Put your mind on Jesus, not on this garbage down here. Put your heart right up there on the throne, not in all of this malarkey down here. And then when you get confronted by the soul of a child or the soul of a friend or a problem in a life of a buddy or a longtime friend or somebody you don't even know, be compassionate. Which means get close enough to that person so you feel their pain and want to help fix it. You don't have to do the fix. Compassion doesn't require repair. It requires identification. You okay with that? Okay, let's go on then. I don't know her name. I'd love to know her name. So many things about this picture I'd love to know. We're in a little tiny village in Ecuador. We're in the Andes. We're at about 13,000 feet. We're doing a medical clinic. Part of the clinic personnel in this case are 3 young residents, I'll get this right, from Fort Sam Houston in the United States Army. They have no spiritual background. They've never gone to church or anything. All 3 of them, no Christian, nothing in their lives. But their boss is a Seventh-day Adventist physician, and so he brought them along to see if they could learn anything. So we've triaged these people. We're so high in the mountains, it's pouring rain outside, everything is mud. Nobody wears shoes. Nobody. This lady has never worn shoes in her life. She's 87. Never worn shoes in her life. She and her husband raise strawberries on the side of the Andean mountains. She walks in the mud. To get here, she had to walk down mud steps through her strawberry plantation, if you could call it that, down to the school, and she sat down. My wife did the triage, took down her, basic information, and then she sat down. One of the young teenagers we had with us came over and said, "You're next." Took her to a young Caucasian physician from Fort Sam Houston. Knew nothing about God, but was beginning to ask some questions. You have to do that after 5 days in the Andes, fixing stuff on people. She tried to ask the lady some questions. Her Spanish was terrible. The lady couldn't speak Spanish at all. She spoke an Indian language way up in the hills. And so as they tried to communicate, and the translator came in and worked it through, I'm 87, that's my husband behind me there. He can't hear, he can only see a little bit, he can't talk or hear anymore, and no, he's no help in the garden. He just sits at home and wishes he were dead. What about you? Oh, it hurts so bad. Well, when you look at the life she led, of course she hurts so bad. This lady has walked up and down with 50 to 70 pounds on her back every day, all her life, in the mud, barefoot. And so the physician goes through what do you give her? Tylenol? That probably would be a good idea. Whole bottle, and say, use them sparingly, but when it really hurts, take 2. And then she said, is there anything else? And the lady said, no, I think that's all. And then the doctor looked at her feet. 87 years, never had a shoe. The feet were like hardened leather, like an old saddle. It's been used forever. And this physician, I was watching from about 200 millimeters away. And I just put my camera down because this was too private a moment. The physician started to cry, and then she turned to one of the teenagers and said, give me a pail of hot water, quick. There was no hot water, but that kid was so resourceful that in a few minutes she came back with warm water in a pail. And that physician took the lady's feet, put them in that pail, and slowly washed the feet. Between the toes, under the toes, clean the toenails. And about halfway through the first foot, I saw that this old lady was weeping. And so was the doc. That's compassion. Okay? That's compassion. When I came home from being a missionary kid, it was 8th grade, San Diego, California. I'd never played baseball. I was awful. I was terrible. I was always picked last, and they wished I'd stay home. And then one day after school, 2 boys, Terry and Eddie, came to me and said, would you like to learn how to play baseball? And I said, yeah. You're the best guys. You're always the captains. Come on out. We'll teach you. They gave me a glove, told me to hold it right in front of my belt buckle and not move it. And they would throw the ball, and what I was supposed to do is when the ball hit the glove, I was to squeeze. And that's the way I learned how to play baseball. From Eddie and Terry, throwing hundreds of balls to first base. Starting to hit fungal buck up so I could catch. Learned to stand behind the plate. Everything that needed to be done, they taught me until I was usually first or second chosen. I'm never going to be a Tim Tebow, but I'll play hard. Compassion. Those 2 guys will always be my best buddies. They saw a kid in pain, and their response was to just pour themselves out for me. Okay, so your assignment for the next 30 seconds. I want you to do this because I think it'll change the way you feel about the rest of the evening and the message that I know that Peter's coming to give you in just a minute or 2. I want you to find somebody that you don't sleep with. Okay? Sorry, it's the best way I know to say that. And I want you to tell them how you have been shown compassion in the last year. You have 60 seconds. Go! Up. Here's your assignment for tonight. And I'm serious. Tonight, before you go to bed, I want you to write 2 emails or text 2 people. One, they've been bugging you in your heart now for several weeks. Somebody that you know has really got a problem and you don't know how to fix it, but you'd sure love to try. Maybe a divorce, it may be money, who knows what it is, a broken down old Ford. whatever it is, send them a text and say you love them. I've been thinking about you. I want you to know that I'm praying for you. You don't have to fix it. Just show compassion. And secondly, I want you to write a text or an email to somebody, maybe the person you were just talking about, somebody who truly showed you compassion in the last few months, somebody who gave themselves so you could stand taller. You see, when Life died, and there he is, looking at me, and tears are flowing down his cheeks, and Life's about 6 inches taller than I am, and he just enveloped me in his big grizzly bear arms, and he said, my friend Dick, when Jesus is in your heart, you love everyone.